All right, we're back on the bottom line, and today we have Bailey Daniel. We're going to talk about phone call performance, but specifically how to structure and deliver feedback to your staff. So, without further ado, let's do an introduction. Bailey, do you mind telling our listeners slash viewers just a little bit about yourself?
Your millions of followers. Yes, thank you, Ken, and hello. As Ken mentioned, my name is Bailey Daniel. I'm the Senior Manager of Lifecycle Marketing for Aesthetic Partners. Aesthetic Partners is a clinically focused medical aesthetic and plastic surgery MSO company that supports practice owners through expansion and growth. We currently have 5 different brands under our portfolio and are continuing to expand and grow into their markets and in different markets across the country. So it's a very exciting time. We're in a huge phase of growth right now. But with Lifecycle Marketing, I manage our patient journey centers, which are our lead nurturing and lead management departments for each of our brands. So we're super hyper focused on everything conversion from forms to phone calls. We also follow all of our patients and leads throughout their patient journey at each of our practices, from step 1 all the way to step 4. We also are responsible for different retention efforts throughout each brand, leveraging our partnership with Allergan and Alley Insights, as well as different patient lists through our practice management systems that we can use. Lapsed patients, our top patients. We can really get very granular with the type of patients that we're pulling and retaining. And yeah, I think that's about it. Charlie and I work very closely together through Line, and I've enjoyed our partnership very much.
That's awesome, Bailey. As you guys can tell, like she knows what she's doing. There's a lot of good stuff there. Yeah, Bailey and I met maybe like 3 years ago, I think, something like that.
The year
Um,
2020 and 2021, like I don't know the difference between those
yeah,
years anymore. So I think it was 2021.
one of those years I got legally married in, and the other one I didn't. Just if you're trying to distinguish.
Same.
Um, oh, cool. So anyway, so
You
I
actually got
think that.
married the day before me, actually.
Oh my God, you're right. What the hell?
You
I
you
forgot about
forget
that.
you forget that.
I did
I know.
forget. So Bailey and I are great friends. We met about 3 years ago. But Bailey's the so the I guess the first practice in aesthetic partners is Synergy, right? And so Synergy's in Raleigh, where we are, and that's how we got connected. So just as she was describing the growth mode, it's been really cool watching that happen. And I mean, aesthetics is such a growing space in general right now. So exciting time. The topic today I was pumped to discuss because we're gonna talk about feedback, as Ken mentioned. One of the things that we notice at Line after we turn on our platform is the practices often most practices they have, of course, the insights from our platform of what's the conversion rate, why aren't people booking in general on a staff member basis, as well. So they know exactly what the team and individual people should focus on to improve. They have that information at their fingertips. The next step, of course, is having conversations with the people on the team to talk about that and then give them some guidance in a positive way so that they make some small adjustments and change the way they're handling different situations. That creates the results of scheduling more patients. What we found is a lot of people, I think, in these practices, and maybe some of our listeners, don't have like formal training that's related to that aspect of managing and leading people, and they just end up not doing it. So, like the same insights and issues over time for some practices can persist. And I'm looking at them from an outsider perspective, going like, that is low hanging fruit, easy to make adjustments there that could have a huge impact on the practice. And it's for some reason really hard for people to even take the step of talking about it. So I wanted to have you on because I know you're really good at this. But why, before we talk about how to do it, why do you think, in your opinion, a lot of leaders don't give feedback to their team? Like, why does that happen?
I think first, leaders are probably not understanding the importance of the phone call and the importance of setting a really stellar first impressions with new and existing patients. So I think that's where it starts. But I think also it just comes down to bandwidth of the management team and being able to really dedicate the time and focus to really stay on top of your staff and focus on this type of feedback and training. Because although you do have to consistently provide the feedback, if you're doing it consistently and in a great, powerful way, it should be pretty short-lived. So either during your staff's onboarding process and training, or if you're revisiting some of your staff's phone call and you're seeing that they're still just not really providing the best experience for your patients, having them come back in and retrain. But I really believe that you should be able to effectively train your staff on how to properly handle phone calls in about 3 to 4 weeks. And then from there, it's just a matter of monitoring. But setting that really strong foundation from the beginning and really being on top of it and hyper-focused at first is what's going to set you up for success long term.
Yeah, that's interesting. The first thing you said about not realizing how important it is. I think most people, if you said, "Hey, is the first impression on the phone important?" Everybody's going to say yes. But if you actually think it's important, then you have spent time thinking about what your team should do on the phone. And when you bring
Right.
someone on the team, you're like, "This is what you do." Like
Right. And
literally, these are the steps you go through.
but you also don't realize how you sound to other people calling. Like
Yeah.
me, yes, I'm very particular, hypercritical. So I'm looking for these type of things and I'm seeking these type of things. But I have quite a bit of experience with doing like some secret shop calls just
Yeah.
to kind of test the waters and see what else is out there. And there are some like glaring things that I can't help but to notice when I'll call other practices. And then I take that feedback, I present it to the team, and I use it as examples. And I say, like, this is why it's so important to ask for that patient name at the beginning of the call. This is why it's so important to make sure that you're inviting a patient to schedule a consultation with you, not just like leaving it hanging and leaving it up to the patient to then ask and engage and, initiate that next step. So once you're able to also provide like that type of example for your team, I think it's really powerful. It really gets their wheels turning and helps them connect the dots to understand like the why behind
Do you pay?
why
Do
we
you?
do things.
I can't remember. You're involved with like hiring as well, right? When you guys are hiring new team members, or you were at some point.
Not anymore.
Um,
Yeah, not anymore. I was at
and
one point.
and so you mentioned like how you sound the phone and stuff and mystery shot. Like, what were things? This. I wasn't planning on asking this, but what in the hiring process, like for someone who's going to handle interactions with, especially new patients, but even existing, where were some key characteristics you may paid attention to in interviewing and all that?
Yeah, I would say just their overall confidence. The phones are a black hole and they are very daunting. You never know what you're going to get on the other side of that phone. So I think kind of like understanding and feeling out the confidence of the candidate is helpful. But also we need to make sure that during the onboarding and training process that you're really setting them up for success right now. Like I would encourage to wait on answering the phones until at least week 3 of their onboarding process because they need to know, the ins and outs of every single service that you offer. They need to know how to schedule through your practice management system, any type of scheduling preferences that you have per practice or per provider. But then they're also, going to need to know how to credential the practice in your providers. So that takes a lot. And you want to set them up for success when they pick up that phone for the first time. And so having that confidence under their belt is really helpful. But I mean, I've had employees before where they just still like couldn't really get over that hump with their confidence of like having a great phone call. And I had to just sit them down and be like, look, it's time. It's time for you
Be
to
confident
step
now.
up. Yes, step it up and let's do this. Okay. And it works.
You know what I always do? If I feel like I'm not going to if I'm losing confidence, I just go with a British accent. Because if you speak in a British accent, no one even cares. They just, what you're saying, they just like it. You agree?
Um,
I'm just kidding. That's a joke.
Sure.
Actually,
Sure.
when I sold bookstore to door back in the day, I did an Australian accent a couple times, which was great. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
that is. Go
I
ahead,
really
Ken.
liked that thought of secret shopping and showing your staff other people's, because you're not like, there's no ego attached or personal, like, you take things personal if it's how I'm doing, but that's really interesting.
I know, and I hate to lead with this on this podcast because like we're trying to keep it positive and cool, but it is good to hear what bad sounds like so that someone else can hear it for themselves, because then they'll realize what they need to do differently to make their call good.
Yeah, I think between making it really tangible and clear, right? So between this is what you're supposed to do, like a one page or something outlining steps of what they actually focus on and say, and then role play slash actual recordings slash mystery shopping. If people can't hear like good, bad, like that is just
Yeah.
that is really powerful, and people will pick up on the differences. And I think most practices aren't providing their staff with those examples. And so then
Right.
that's probably part of why they don't want to have the feedback conversation, because they're like, well, what do I talk about? And when they've tried to do it, it's very theoretical. And when the staff member leaves that conversation, they're not prepared to say, what am I supposed to focus on the next time the phone rings, right? It's just
Right.
conceptual thing. But if you give them those examples, they literally hear it, and that's a lot easier for people to, I think, internalize.
Yeah. So at Synergy, we've had our PJC in place since 2019. So it's like our most established PJC across all the brands for
What does that
aesthetic
stand for
partners.
again for listeners?
Patient,
PJC?
oh, excuse me, Patient Journey Center, PJC for
Love
short.
it. Love it.
So as a part of our front desk onboarding process, one of the PJC coordinators trains them. And so the first training is they're just shadowing and observing her. It's like an hour-long training. The second, she gives them a little bit of homework to do where they have to create their own script. The second training, she has them hop in on some calls, and then she is literally sitting right beside them. So as soon as that call is over, she can provide feedback, or she can kind of guide them through the call if they're like struggling and drowning and need a little support. So that's really helpful as well in boosting their confidence. But, to your point, Charlie, of like managers not being able to hold their team accountable because they don't really know what good is, or they don't know, how to do it. I really enjoy explaining and coaching on the why we say things and why it's so important to have the phone call structured the way that we do. Just to, go into patient psychology a little bit more, and to also flip the script so that our team members can understand, like, yes, this is what you're saying, but this is how it's being received by our patients. Like, some helpful reminders. Someone who's a very new patient who has never received Botox before doesn't necessarily need to know all of the details about dosage and, cost. They do need to know about cost to an extent, but, their main questions are always going to be like, do you offer it? Maybe how much does it cost, and what are the next steps? What do I need to do? So we have to remember that, and also remind ourselves. I have a lot of isms that I'll use in my trainings, and one of my isms is that, like, this is our world, this is where we live, this is our normal and our comfort zone. But for someone who's new to our practice or our industry, it's the opposite experience for them. So we have to lead with that type of empathy, understanding that they might not know all of the questions to ask, but it's our responsibility to guide them through it, and direct them to the best provider that's going to be a good fit for them.
There's a really good concept called the curse of knowledge. There's a good book called Made to Stick that I recommend that talks about it. But after you have, when you have learned something and you've talked about it for a long period of time, even simple things, if someone's never been exposed to it, like, they're going to know nothing. And so you have to, I think what you're talking about there, Bailey, is the empathy, put the perspective of like, what is this person, what is their experience going to be like if they've never looked into Botox before and they call me, and I literally have been talking about Botox for 5 years. Like, there's going to be a huge gap, and even the very simple things. And so I think that's important to to remember.
And something that you actually taught me, Charlie, was that A patient is also gets overwhelmed by too many details. So
Yes.
what we on the phones, our job is to convert that patient from a caller to a booked consultation. It's then either your consultant or your provider's responsibility to convert that patient into, from lead to receiving treatment. So it's our job to book the consultation and to guide them and lead them on how to best do that, not to get into every single detail on the treatment or the technology, because that becomes very overwhelming to our patients.
This may or may not be a good example, but I'm laughing because, like, when you go to a nice restaurant, they have a special, and I find a lot of times the server will tell you all the details, and then they'll pause, and then I'll go, "Is it good?"
Yeah, or
Because
how much is it? Is it
you know what
this?
I mean?
Is
It's
it
just
this?
like they're just telling me all the stuff it does, and I'm like, "Is it good?" Because like I don't care, right? I want to know if it's good. Like maybe I want to know like what it is, but they just talk about how it's prepared and stuff, and I'm not a chef, right? I don't friggin' know. So that's sort of, I don't know if that connects or not, but I just thought I'd
I,
say it.
I, I think it does. I think it tracks for sure.
It tracks. Awesome. Well, I think one of the sort of quick summary takeaway there is like think about how much Bailey's talking about, Ken, with just the training, the expectations, the foundation that's there
Hmm.
to get people, like she said, set up for success. What I'm curious about now, Bailey, is the ongoing. So like let's say someone's been there for a year, right? And so they know what the expectations are. I assume you guys have human beings that you're employing. And so there's going to be like changes and fluctuations and people are dealing with stuff. It's just human nature that performance is not always exactly consistent and just they're going to waver with things that they did really are doing really well or things that are challenging for them. Do you guys have like a specific cadence of checking in and feedback? Is it dependent on performance? Like, how do you deal with feedback and maintaining performance after someone's been there for a while?
Yeah, so fortunately for us, we have our patient journey centers. The patient journey centers have managers or leads in place that are responsible for, all of our team's conversion metrics. So they would be the person, we're in line all day long anyways, but they're the person who's looking through their individual performance metrics in line and saying like, hey, our goal is 70%. We want 70% conversion rate for our inbound phone call interactions for non-surgical treatments. I do think depending on your practice, if you have surgical procedures and if you accept insurance or not, that's a little bit different and we should set some different expectations as far as conversion metrics go. But for any type of like non-surgical inbound phone call, I think 70% is high, but a good goal to have. So they would be the ones who are on a weekly basis staying on top of those conversion numbers. And then at the end of each month, if we see that, conversion didn't hit the mark, then we would initiate a follow-up and an additional training. But we would also, come to that training and provide exact details on, areas for improvement. So we're able to go through each and every call and follow along the script line by line and say, here's where, we could have said this right here, or, ooh, you mentioned marketing channel at the very end of the call, but remember that's most impactful when you ask at the beginning of the call because it leads, really nicely and flows into the conversation really well. And, not to just talk about line a lot, but the reason I really like line is because it makes everything like just very straightforward. The data doesn't lie. You're able to deliver your feedback to your team members in a very direct way without, anything being personal. You can make it fun. It doesn't have to be super rigid and serious. I like to kind of play around with it and give some examples of, again, my little isms that I like to say and how I would have handled that a little bit differently. And, I keep it upbeat and fun and I think people like it. They seem to like it. But yeah, I think, being able to give really direct feedback is going to be your best bet. Being clear is kind. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. A lot of little isms that we can give. But yeah, typically that's on like a monthly basis. If we
Yeah.
find that an employee is still not consistently hitting the mark for, more than a quarter, then that's when we would need to reevaluate probably the position itself, especially if it's still within that employee's 90-day period, because this is, a part of the job and an expectation and a responsibility as well. So, just like your face-to-face patient interaction, what those standards are, the same applies for the phones. And, no matter what, we want to make sure that our patients are receiving a consistent experience, no matter who they talk to. So if they're talking to their most senior employee versus someone who's, within their 90 days, we want to make sure that, all calls are, up to the same standard.
Sounds like the feedback conversation, I mean, it's just so much easier to have with everything else you're describing in place, because what that means is like it's not going to be a surprise to the team if they're having a feedback conversation. You have clear goals, they're all being measured, they know there's going to be a at least monthly review. And so they're probably coming into that conversation like in some ways ready, like maybe even excited about like, okay, I want to hit the goal. I didn't hit it, and I want to know what I need to work on because I want to hit the goal. So part of the answer to my question of what are you thinking about in that conversation? How do you make it not negative? Is that you have all that foundation. But in addition to that, when you're sitting down with someone, what is on your mind of like how you start the conversation and understood on being direct? But do you find it's better to just like say, hey, listen, here's, of course, where we want to be. Here's where you're at. Let's talk about it. Or how do you do that in a way that disarms defensiveness from the team member?
Yeah, I think walking them through the data a couple different ways is helpful. So since we're just talking about inbound phone calls, that's pretty direct and straightforward. I think if we were discussing form follow-up and form lead conversion, that would be a different story. But since we're just talking about inbound phone calls, I would start by just going to the previous month, pulling the list of all of the calls associated with that employee's name, and then going through them, assessing why they didn't book, where the areas of opportunity were in the script, and kind of just getting right into it and getting to the point. I do think that as long as you do keep it upbeat and positive, and see, this type of feedback as an opportunity, not like a scolding or a punishment by any means, then you're going to motivate your team to want to be better. I think also, we have like a super solid script in place that we use for all of our brands. And while the bones, as I call it, of the script are pretty much the same, there are some differences in the script depending on the brand, because we want to make sure that we're representing the brand well for their patient base. And we know that each brand is different. So, we fall back on the bones, but then encourage and empower our employees to not be robots and not feel like they're having to really adhere to the super rigid script, and that's making them nervous. And so therefore, they're butchering the whole thing. They can be themselves, but they just have to understand the importance of the order of which you say it, why it's so important, and how to maintain control over that call. So when I'm doing my trainings with the team, that's what I'm really reinforcing, is kind of like educating them on why it's so important. What I find is it's mainly like the order in which the call is being handled that the staff member isn't adhering to. I also will explain things in a way that's like, okay, this is the thing that we can control over here, and here are the scenarios that we can not control in our phone calls. So things that we cannot control include like someone calling asking if we accept insurance when we're a cosmetic only practice. Okay, that's, we can still talk about our services and try to convert them and get them to book a consultation. But ultimately, if someone only wants to pursue an insurance-based practice, that's out of our control. Someone calling wanting to get information for someone else, which I always find wild. Like, who are all these people calling on behalf of other people? Like you need to make your own dentist appointment. Like, you are a grown man. I'm talking to you, Ken. You're a grown man. You need to make your own dentist appointment.
Whose man's is this? Damn it, Ken. Go get your own Botox. What are you doing, man?
Is my breath that bad over the internet?
But anyway, so that's people do that. People will call on behalf of someone else. So there are some things that we cannot control, with phones and being really hyper-focused on the patient experience over the phones. I've found that our team members can sometimes tend to fixate around the things that we cannot control. So instead, you really got to reel them in. You have to explain the differences between the two and say, like, let's just shift our focus on the areas that we can control and let's really build our momentum there, because you get told no a lot over the phone. And so it does take a pretty specific skill set and someone who is inherently sales oriented to be able to navigate that and not get like, burdened by being told no all the time. So we shift our focus, we keep it moving, we focus on the things that we can control. And so, yeah, that's like a gist of kind of what my feedback sessions would look like with the team.
Yeah, there's two things in life you can control. You know this, Ken. Effort, attitude. That's it. Anything else, block it out. Love all that. And then my last question, I don't know if you have anything else, Ken. Can this be done effectively without an incentive program?
I think so, yes. I do think it's helpful to at least start by putting an incentive in place. I have, different experience with giving incentives versus not, and receiving some feedback from the team that was not incentivized. I think it can be a little bit hard to not incentivize your team since they have such visibility into their conversion and their performance and in others as well. That's where things can get a little bit tricky. I would encourage that you do incentivize your team over this, especially if it's a new initiative that you're really wanting to get launched and pushed and you're really wanting to go well. And that incentive can be based on, overall conversion for the inbound calls that you answered that month. You can incentivize your team based on overall phone answer rate, not including, calls that go to voicemail or any abandoned calls, but what is like our actual answer rate. You could also incentivize your team based on like different objections that you're really hyper focused on overcoming. There's a lot that you can do to incentivize your team, and then incentivize them based on either like number of leads that you converted or number of calls that you handled. I think that depends on the nature of the call, whether it's like a surgical versus a non-surgical inquiry.
Totally.
I would incentivize.
Makes sense.
We need to do another one with Bailey, Ken, on PJC stuff. We'll table that for now, but that's a whole topic on creating that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
That was so, there's so much good stuff in there. Really, really, really good. Ken, you taking us home, or where are we at?
I love it. Super important. Go ahead, Kate Bailey.
Did we answer all the questions?
We don't have to do that, Bailey. We're just trying to. We want people to enjoy listening.
I like to follow.
I think we're accomplishing
to know the rules. I like to follow the rules.
Well, I think we can control the effort and attitude here, hopefully. So I think
so.
Okay. I feel great.
I feel great as well. Bailey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys for inviting me. It was fun.